The air inside the Lakewood apartment felt unnaturally still, as if the walls themselves had sucked the warmth out of the world. Outside, the sun was low, casting orange streaks across the pavement. The front hallway was empty. No coats left behind, no shoes astray. Just the soft hum of the thermostat and the faint drip of a faucet from the kitchen. Skylar Nemetz stood by the doorway. His body rigid, one sneakered foot dangling, the other flat on the threshold. His uniform jacket was slung across one shoulder, and in his hands, he held a pair of goggles still wet from the training ground near Fort Lewis. His eyes, dark, haunted, swept the room before settling on the heart of the scene. Danielle. She lay face up on the couch, her head tilted slightly to one side. Her auburn hair, once curled and full, spread out in a dark halo. The life had drained from her face. On the coffee table, a single glass of wine sat half-finished. The label, faintly visible, bore the name of a local vineyard. The candle on the table was bent in wax, a pool of hardened magma pooling at its base. Everything seemed in place, as though she'd been on the brink of rest. But something about the tableau tapped at a door in Skylar's chest, one he hadn't fully closed. He moved slowly, almost mechanically, toward Danielle, his heart pounding like heavy boots on a bunker floor. He knelt beside her, ignoring the cold rush of fear that reminded him she might still be alive. He brushed his fingers along her arm, only to feel the ceramic solidity of death beneath her skin. Blood pooled at her temple, a dark stain on the pale fabric of the couch. Danielle. His lips barely moved. His breath trembled. He reached for his phone, dialing 911 before he could consider anything else. His voice cracked as he spoke with the operator. She's not breathing. Please send help." Within minutes, red lights flashed through the living room window, painting the floor crimson. EMTs spilled into the apartment, their presence cleansing yet invasive. They moved with quiet urgency, checking her vitals, shaking their heads. A sheet was placed over her gently, like a monument dropping into place. Skylar stepped back. He folded against the far wall, a soldier recalled into a different kind of battle, the silent fray of grief. Detectives later described Skylar as sober, almost stoic, not the raw panic some would expect. He answered questions with short breaths, hands trembling as he stepped out of uniform and into the pale streetlight of interrogation. "What happened?" Detective Sarah Lou would ask the next morning, urgency in her tone. "I just got home," he said, voice low. I was exhausted. Took a shower. Came back and she was like that." He probed gently. "Timing. Shower." He stuck to facts. In the first hours, the apartment was a crime scene. Forensics arrived with camera equipment, evidence collection kits, and blacklight torches. The spilled wine glass was lifted, placed in an evidence bag. The couch was marked for patterns of spatter. Officer notes recorded the curvature of the head wound, the lack of visible defensive damage. No upraised hands, no broken nails. One lab tech found a cast-off blood pattern on the wall behind the couch, consistent with a blunt force object swung at shoulder height. Detective Lou's pulse rose when she heard this. Tapping Skylar's yellow legal tape-wrapped wine glass against a metal counter, a forensic serologist diagnosed. Single blow. Definitely deliberate. Meanwhile, a neighbor reported seeing Skylar leave the building in fatigues, carrying a backpack and what looked like a bottle of water. That was around 6:15 p.m. Paramedics arrived at 6:45. He claimed he'd been inside the whole time, but timelines were starting to unravel. A search of the apartment yielded no weapon, no pills by her bed. Skylar had a mild graze on his knuckle. He said it was from pulling off his boots. They found no sign of a fight, nothing overturned, no cushions torn, no disturbance. But the broken candlestick on the table and the dented lampshade told a different story. Outside, the forensic team collected soil from beneath the couch legs and dusted the coffee table for prints. Skylar's boots left distinct tread imprints on the rug, boot prints that matched a sample photo from base records. He'd probably slept in them. Had he? The detective drew from her pocket a scribbled post-it. It read, "Wine plus couch plus cast-off equals question mark." She wrote it down in her notebook. Accident versus assault? By dawn, Danielle's autopsy was in progress. Inside the sterile morgue, the medical examiner found a subgaleal hematoma over her right temple, about 3 inches in diameter. A single laceration. No fractures of the skull. The blow was strong but not lethal on its own. However, the ME noted petechial hemorrhaging, tiny capillary bursts beneath the skin of the eyes, likely from strangulation or suffocation just before death. That would mean she was alive after the blow. She wasn't found in that position randomly. By midday, toxicology reported GHB and a mild sedative, benzodiazepine, present in her system, levels too high to be therapeutic. She'd been drugged. That toxin couldn't have arrived on its own. Detective Lou sat in a small office cluttered with reports. She stared at a timeline chart with jittery lines and data points. Skylar's phone ping times. Surveillance camera timestamps. She ran her finger along the line that intersected near 6:30 p.m., where his call came in. Except he was supposedly at home at that time. Her gut whispered that there was a break in his story. He'd slipped out. Sought something. Maybe chemicals. Maybe answers. She requested all pharmacy sales. She asked for patrol dashcam footage the second time they stopped him near Tacoma. When the dashcam revealed his truck passing the pharmacy drive-thru at 6:17 p.m., with silhouette of a man leaning over the passenger seat. He didn't look like he just carried a fallen wife. He looked like someone on a mission. That evening, Skylar was brought in again. They let him watch a forensic video. A slow-motion reconstruction showing a swinging candlestick and the blood pattern cast off. His face, reflected in the monitor, stiffened. He looked away. "Well," Lou prodded gently. "Tell me." Skylar arched his back, ran his fingers through his hair. Finally, he spoke in a cracked whisper. "I went out," he said, "to get something for my ankle. For the training. It was late. I didn't want to wake her." Lou leaned forward. "Why at 6:15? He swallowed. I needed pain relief. I saw it at the pharmacy. Figured she'd still be asleep." "And what about the wine glass?" Skylar's Adam's apple bobbed. I didn't want her to notice my pain meds. I asked her to drink wine to celebrate my return." The detective accepted words. Recorded them. But in her mind, fabric well spun but still fabric. Days later, lab results confirmed. GHB found in Danielle's glass was not synthetically derived. It had come from a liquid concentrate sold only online. They traced a purchase via Skylar's credit card, made earlier that day. They got the order log, the shipping slip. The label had been thrown away. No sign of tampering in the apartment. Evidence was quietly mounting. Detective Lou learned that only one person had browser history for GH Boost, the brand of supplement containing GHB. That browser history matched an evening time on the laptop Skylar carried in his backpack. He hadn't used it at the base that day. No emails sent. Nothing logged except that website. She knew that without a confession, it wouldn't hold wall against a strong defense. But still, "We have you," she thought. On the 5th day, he came to them again. This time there were tears. Not of remorse, but of exhaustion. "I'm sorry." The interrogation room had a strange silence to it, one that came not from the absence of sound, but from the weight of what hadn't been said yet. The detective leaned forward, elbows on the table, fingers lightly steepled as if praying the truth out of him. Skylar sat across from her, shoulders slumped, his fingertips twitching slightly every time the door creaked behind them. He had spoken the night before. Not fully. Not clearly. But a few words had cracked loose, as if something inside him was no longer willing to stay shut. "I'm sorry," he'd whispered, voice gravelly. "I didn't mean for it to happen like that." But what had happened? That was still hidden behind clouded eyes and measured breathing. Danielle's parents had flown in from Idaho. Their grief was raw, untamed, and all-consuming. Her mother couldn't speak without trembling. Her father had offered only one sentence to the press: "I want the truth, no matter how ugly it is." It was getting uglier by the day. Detective Lou had spent the last 48 hours immersed in phone logs, browser histories, interviews, and behavioral analysis. What was forming wasn't just a tragic accident. It was a narrative, one layered in jealousy, misdirection, and a creeping sense of control. Danielle had told a friend weeks before that Skylar was different lately. She'd said the training had changed him, that he came home jumpy, hyper-aware, distant. He didn't like when she wore makeup, didn't like when she texted late. Once he'd thrown her phone into the sink and told her, "If I can't trust you, that thing goes." She laughed it off. The friend hadn't. Then there were the financial records. Skylar had withdrawn $600 in cash the day before the training exercise ended. Odd timing. He was on base, meals and supplies covered. That money was never found. Not in the apartment. Not in his locker. Not in Danielle's purse. But a partial fingerprint was found on the bag the GHB had been shipped in. His thumbprint. It was getting harder to hold on to the word accident. The next breakthrough came from an unexpected place: the building's maintenance man. He'd come in the morning after Danielle's death to check a faulty water heater in the unit below. But while in the stairwell, he'd heard arguing. He couldn't make out every word, but he remembered Skylar's voice. Loud, aggressive. "I told you not to lie to me," he'd recalled hearing. Then a muffled thump. He hadn't thought much of it at the time. People fight, especially young couples. But when he saw Skylar later that night standing in the hallway barefoot and dazed, he had a sinking feeling in his gut. He looked like a ghost, he'd said. Like someone who'd already left the world. Surveillance footage from the building's hallway showed Skylar leaving the unit with a trash bag slung over his shoulder at 6:10 p.m. He returned at 6:22. When investigators later searched the building's dumpsters, the bag was gone. A janitorial pickup had already taken the trash to the city transfer station. Detectives spent 3 hours combing through the station. What they found changed everything. Inside a black trash bag, half-torn, was a broken wine glass with red lipstick and 2 receipts, one for the GHB purchase, and the other for a new SIM card bought earlier that week. A pair of latex gloves were wedged inside a crumpled paper towel soaked in pinkish fluid. Lou placed the receipts on the table in front of Skylar 2 days later. His eyes didn't leave the GHB line. "I wasn't going to use it like that," he said. "Then how were you going to use it?" He didn't answer. That night, detectives dug deeper into Skylar's digital footprint. His Xbox messages showed weeks of escalating paranoia. He'd told an online friend he believed Danielle was cheating, that he didn't know how to keep her in line, that girls like that always find someone else when you're away. That same friend later came forward and said Skylar had joked about wiping the slate clean before his last deployment. "I didn't think he meant anything by it," the friend said. "But now, I'm not so sure." At the military base, officers interviewed Skylar's superior. They found he had an exemplary field record, but a warning for aggression during a weapons drill. He'd reportedly slammed his fist into a locker after a teammate mocked him about his wife posting thirst traps online. He had trouble separating stress from reality. A counselor had written. He needed time. He needed help. He never got it. The moment of collapse came during the second formal interview. Skylar had held out long enough, too long. But as Lou laid out the timeline, the inconsistencies, the evidence, she watched him slowly fall apart. "It was a mistake," he said, barely audible. "What was?" "I just wanted to talk to her. but she kept texting while I was explaining. I grabbed the phone. She got up. We argued. She said something about going back to Idaho. His voice cracked. I picked up the wine glass to take it from her. It broke. She screamed. I didn't think. I pushed her. She hit her head. There was a long silence. And the GHB? Lou asked. Skylar didn't speak. She pressed again. You drugged her, Skylar. He finally nodded. I thought it'd calm her down. I just wanted her to be soft again. Like before. The confession wasn't perfect. There were gaps, parts he left out or skewed. But paired with the forensic evidence, the receipts, and the talk screens, it was enough. Danielle's story had been buried beneath layers of intention and manipulation. But now it had air. The DA filed formal charges: second-degree murder, tampering with evidence, and unlawful disposal of a controlled substance. The trial would be months away, but the headlines came fast. Infantryman charged in wife's mysterious death. Soldier's love story ends in murder. From deployment to deception, the Skylar Nemetz case. But for Danielle's family, it wasn't a story. It was a wound. One that no conviction could truly close. And yet, behind the grief and horror, there was a quiet relief. The lie had cracked. The mask had slipped. Danielle had finally been seen. The courtroom smelled like old varnish and bleach. Sterile, suffocating. It was October when the trial began. Nearly a year since Danielle's life had ended in that quiet Lakewood apartment. But the memory of her still hung in the air like perfume. Skylar Nemetz sat at the defense table in a black suit 2 sizes too large. His military posture was gone. Shoulders slouched, eyes dull, hands nervously folding and unfolding a tissue he didn't realize he was holding. The courtroom buzzed with the low hum of reporters, family members, detectives, and spectators. The prosecution's opening was brutal in its clarity. Assistant Prosecutor Amanda Foster walked the jury through the timeline. Each movement, each inconsistency, each deliberate action Skylar had taken before and after Danielle's death. He didn't panic, she said. He planned. He bought the substance that later showed up in her bloodstream. He removed evidence. He lied about where he was. This was not a moment of passion. This was a decision. The defense painted a different picture. One of a young man, traumatized by war games and broken communication, who returned home to a marriage crumbling in silence. Their argument: Danielle's death was a tragic accident, made worse by Skylar's inability to process what had happened. He was scared, the defense attorney said. Not guilty. Scared. And you'll see why that matters. But from the jury's expressions, it was clear the truth wouldn't be easy to fog over. They had already seen the photos. Danielle's lifeless body, the bruising, the blood splatter behind the couch, the bottle of GHB hidden under the sink with Skylar's fingerprints all over it. Still, the prosecution knew their case needed one thing to land fully: intent. That's where the investigative team stepped in. Detective Sarah Lou, crisp in a navy blazer, took the stand and walked the jury through each step of her investigation. Her voice steady, facts razor-sharp. She described the trajectory of the blood cast-off pattern. She noted the time discrepancies from cell tower pings. She detailed how the wine glass had both Danielle's lip print and GHB residue, and how Skylar's credit card had been used to purchase that very substance online 2 days before her death. She testified to Skylar's online search history. GHB dosage: girlfriend. How long does GHB stay in wine? And most chilling of all, how to tell if someone OD'd. Then came the phone records. Texts from Danielle to a friend showed her hesitation, her fear, her growing desire to separate. "I'm starting to feel like I'm walking on eggshells," one message read. "He watches everything. Even how long I'm in the bathroom." A week before she died, she'd written, "I think I'll go stay at my mom's soon. I need space to think." Another message, sent just 2 days before her death. "He says I'm different, that I'm hiding things. I'm not. "I'm just tired." The jury read each message in silence. Skylar's attorney tried to argue that the GHB was recreational, that Danielle had used it willingly, perhaps as an enhancer for an intimate evening. But the toxicologist made it clear. The amount found in her system was far above any casual dose. It was incapacitating. She wouldn't have been able to fight back, the toxicologist testified. She'd be barely able to walk. It was that testimony that shifted something in the room. Danielle, once imagined as simply a victim of a violent blow, was now understood as someone quietly drugged and disoriented before her death. The motive wasn't rage. It was control. A neighbor took the stand next. She was nervous, clutching her handbag with both hands as if it might float away. She described hearing raised voices the night Danielle died. One male, one female. Then silence. Then footsteps up and down the hallway. She'd looked through her peephole and saw Skylar carrying a trash bag. "I thought he was taking out garbage," she said. "But it was heavy. The way he held it. It didn't look like garbage." Her voice cracked. "I wish I had called someone." The defense tried to dismiss her account as unreliable. "It was dark. You can't be sure what you saw." But it didn't matter. The image was already in the jury's mind. Skylar in the shadows, disposing of something he shouldn't have had. Finally, Danielle's mother took the stand. Her grief was palpable. Her hands trembled as she clutched a photo of Danielle in her graduation cap. "She was my baby," she whispered. "She was smart and funny. She loved fiercely. She believed in people, even when they didn't deserve it." She looked directly at Skylar. "She told me once that she was afraid, not of him hitting her, but of how cold he could be. She said it was like the person she loved had turned off." Her words echoed in the chamber long after she left the stand. The defense called Skylar to testify, a risky move. He stood, hands clasped, voice low and strained. "I didn't mean to hurt her," he said. "I came home and things felt different. I thought she was hiding something. I didn't know how to talk to her. Got jealous. I did." He wiped his eyes. "We had wine. We argued. She said she might leave. I picked up the glass and it broke." He screamed. Pushed her back. "I didn't even see where she hit. It was 1 second." When asked about the GHB, he hesitated. "I bought it because I thought maybe it'd help her sleep. I didn't think. I never meant to give her too much." It was a half-confession, mired in contradictions. The prosecutor's cross was swift. "Did she agree to take it?" "I don't know. You mixed it into her drink, didn't you?" "I didn't force her." "You didn't ask her either, did you?" Skylar's silence was louder than any answer. When the jury left to deliberate, it was late afternoon. Outside, a cold wind carried the scent of pine and firewood from chimneys nearby. Reporters huddled around the courthouse steps, waiting. Took the jury only 6 hours. Guilty second-degree murder. Guilty tampering with evidence. Guilty delivery of a controlled substance. Skylar showed no emotion as the verdict was read. Just that same blank stare, like a soldier watching smoke rise from something already burned to ash. Danielle's family wept. They hugged one another. Her father mouthed the words, "Thank you," to the jury. Judge Halberd's sentence was delivered 2 weeks later. 27 years without parole. The courtroom emptied. Cameras flashed. The public moved on. But the quiet never left that apartment. Or the people who loved Danielle. Detective Lou, after the verdict, stood alone in her office and pulled the evidence box from her shelf one last time. Inside were Danielle's phone, her bracelet, and the cork from the wine bottle. Lou closed it gently. Sometimes closure doesn't come with peace, just with truth. The prison intake process was a blur of fluorescent lighting, barking orders, and the cold clank of metal doors. Skylar Nemetz, now stripped of his uniform and everything it once stood for, entered the Washington State Penitentiary under inmate ID number 437819. The 27-year sentence weighed heavier than the body armor he used to wear. His military haircut was still fresh, a ghost of the life he'd abandoned with a single act of irreversible cruelty. He didn't speak much in those early days. Correctional officers observed his silence as eerie. He wasn't combative, just blank, like a light switch permanently flipped off. His cellmate would later say, "He stared at the wall like he was still in a foxhole." Except this time, nobody was coming to pull him out. But even behind bars, Skylar couldn't escape the ripple of what he'd done. Danielle's face stared back at him from national news recaps and true crime specials. Every article painted him the same way: trained killer, jealous husband, domestic monster. He had entered the army as a patriot. He would be remembered as a cautionary tale. Back in Lakewood, Danielle's apartment had long since been emptied. Her belongings boxed and sent back to Idaho. Her toothbrush still had toothpaste on the bristles. Her favorite pink hoodie was folded neatly on the couch. And on the fridge, beneath a magnet that said, "Come home safe," was a list of things she had planned to do that weekend. Call mom, get groceries, look at job applications. A life frozen mid-sentence. The military had conducted its own internal review. The findings were uncomfortable. Skylar had never been flagged for domestic violence, but multiple squad mates had expressed concerns over his temper, his possessiveness, his late-night rants during training. One even remembered Skylar breaking a folding chair after seeing Danielle comment on another man's Facebook photo. The Army's psychological evaluation team concluded what the prosecutors had argued all along. Skylar was suffering from a volatile mix of immaturity, untreated anxiety, and an obsessive need for control. Combined with access to weapons and a wife who had begun to emotionally distance herself, it was a recipe for fatal escalation. And yet, Danielle had never filed a complaint, never told her chain of command, never called the police. Like many victims of coercive control, she internalized the fear and rationalized the red flags until it was too late. Her death sparked uncomfortable conversations across military bases nationwide. At Fort Lewis, relationship counseling became mandatory for certain units. A quiet bulletin was circulated: "If your spouse says they're afraid of you, believe them. And tell someone." In the media, the case exploded. It had every element of a tabloid dream: a young, photogenic couple, a decorated soldier turned suspect, a suburban crime scene soaked in hidden tension. But what set this case apart was its psychological nuance. This wasn't a murder born of momentary rage. It was a slow, creeping erosion of emotional safety. One national outlet ran a two-part exposé titled, "The Home Front War: When Soldiers Bring the Battle Home." It examined the growing crisis of domestic abuse within military families, often fueled by trauma, isolation, and toxic masculinity wrapped in patriotic armor. Danielle's story became a symbol, not just of what had happened, but of what could be prevented. Please help us keep these stories alive. Subscribe to our channel, like, and comment below with your thoughts. Every voice matters.